The American stand-up comedian Will Rogers often began his sarcastic political comments with the statement, "All I know is just what I read in the newspapers." This statement is a telling observation about the source of most of the knowledge and information that each of us possess about public affairs. This is mainly because most of the issues and concerns that engage our attention are not amenable to direct personal experience. Hi, I'm Amrita, and today we are going to study an extremely important theory. A theory that helps us understand the role that media plays in crafting ideas in our mind. As Walter Lippmann noted in Public Opinion, the world that we have to deal with politically is out of reach, out of sight, and out of mind. In Will Rogers and Walter Lippmann's life, the daily newspaper was the principal source of information about public affairs. Today, we also have television besides the ever-increasing panoply of new communication technologies. But the central point remains the same. For nearly all of the concerns on the public agenda, whether political, social, or cultural, we as citizens deal with only a second-hand reality. A reality that is mostly structured by journalists' reports about these events and situations. In other words, we have never really personally experienced much of what we know or think we know. Quoting words from George Gerbner, professor of telecommunication, "We live in a world erected by the stories we hear, see, and tell, unlocking incredible riches through imagery and words, conjuring up the unseen through art, creating towering works of imagination and fact through science, poetry, songs, tales, reports, and laws. That is the magic of human life. Through that magic, we live in a world much wider than the threats and the gratifications of the immediate physical environment, which is the world of other species." He further writes, "Stories socialize us into roles of gender, age, class, vocation, and lifestyle, and offer models of conformity or targets for rebellion. They weave the seamless web of the cultural environment that cultivates most of what we think, what we do, and how we conduct our affairs." You may remember Mike Teave from the Chocolate Factory. He won one of the Willy Wonka's golden chocolate bars. In the film, he watched a lot of Wild West movies. So many, in fact, that he believed the real world was just like the Wild West. This is an example of the cultivation part of the media. In 2001, 13-year-old Jason Lind of Torrington, America, was hospitalized with second and third degree burns after he and a friend poured gasoline on his feet and legs and lit it on fire, in imitation of a stunt seen on MTV's popular show Jackass. In 1969, a young news reporter from the British Broadcasting Corporation was sent to cover the Vietnam War. Not being very experienced or knowledgeable about what he was observing, he started off his first televised report of an American attack on a Vietnam stronghold with, "My God, it's just like watching television." In different ways, these examples sum up the main theme of our lesson today, that our experience with media is a major source of all the knowledge that we acquire about the world. In fact, this acquired knowledge has a direct consequence on our behavior and shapes our attitudes. We may call this a cognitive approach to mass communication because the focus here is on the way that our minds create a psychological reality, a reality about the world constructed from our experience with the media. This mental reality then becomes the basis for developing our attitudes and motivating our behaviors, and therefore has a great impact on our lives. Instead of the media being a more or less an accurate reflection of some external reality, it becomes the reality, much different from the real world and against which the real world is compared. Thus, the media view of the world becomes, in many cases, more real than the real world itself. George Gerbner's cultivation theory was developed to study this definitive effect that television has on its viewers. According to K. Miller, author of the book Communication Theories, Perspectives, Processes and Contexts, published in 2005, cultivation theory was not developed to study targeted and specific effects. For example, that watching Superman will lead children to attempt to fly by jumping out of the window, but rather in terms of the cumulative and overarching impact television has on the way we see the world in which we live. Hence, the associated term cultivation analysis. Primarily a social theory, the cultivation theory examined the long-term effects of television on American audiences. Developed by George Gerbner and Larry Gross of the University of Pennsylvania, cultivation theory derived from several large-scale research projects as part of an overall research project entitled Cultural Indicators. The purpose of the Cultural Indicators project was mainly to discover and track the cultivated effects of television on viewers. They were essentially concerned with the effects of television programming, particularly violent programming, on the attitudes and behaviors of the American public. Gerbner and Gross assert that the overall concern about the effects of television on audiences stemmed from the unprecedented centrality of television in American culture. They confirm that television as a mass medium of communication had formed into a common symbolic environment that bound diverse communities together, socializing people into standardized roles and behaviors. In other words, the theory focused on the idea that television plays a central role in forming viewers' perceptions of the world by affecting their ways of thinking, beliefs, and attitudes. The severity of these effects depends on the amount of television an individual watches each day. Even though the immediate consequences of watching television may be small, the effects accumulate over time and sooner or later have a significant impact on the viewer, and in time even affecting our culture as a whole. There is considerable research done that confirms that the images depicted on television can have an immense impression on the various aspects that make up a society. For the sake of his experiment, George Gerbner places television viewers into three categories. Light viewers include people who watch less than 2 hours of television a day. Medium viewers include people who watch between 2 and 4 hours of television a day. And heavy viewers refers to audience that watch more than 4 hours of television a day. The idea being to study and compare the two extreme groups of television viewers, namely the heavy and the light viewers. Post-refining and extending the research for 20 years, Gerbner established that heavy viewers hold opinions and ideals that are typically portrayed on television rather than what exists in the real world. In 1980, Gerbner writes, "For heavy viewers, television virtually monopolizes and subsumes other sources of information, ideas, and consciousness, which in turn leads to influencing the viewer's belief system." While developing the cultivation theory, Gerbner noticed two main occurrences that augment and illustrate the cultivation theory. These he termed as mainstreaming and resonance. According to Gerbner, mainstreaming occurs when heavy viewers, in spite of coming from different demographic groups, still acquire similar ways of seeing the world and a commonality of outlook. This commonality of outlook is mainly cultivated by television and is therefore not shared by light viewers from these different groups. Gerbner uses the example of the mean world syndrome to illustrate this concept, where respondents to particular questions regarding trust, no matter what their demographical situations, as long as they were heavy viewers, would typically display sentiments of mistrust, a notion often shown in television dramas. The data collected from this experiment points to the idea that television does contribute to the cultivation of common perspectives. In particular, heavy viewing may serve to cultivate beliefs of otherwise disparate and divergent groups towards a more homogeneous mainstream view. For example, if somebody keeps watching abusive behavior on TV, sooner or later he will begin to accept it as the norm of normal behavior. Similarly, with more and more people, not necessarily from the same economic and educated background, watching these shows, mainstreaming of the view will occur. Heavy exposure to violence, as shown in the many reality shows of today, will soon normalize violence, anesthetizing some people to the real-world violence, even as it whets the appetite in others for ever higher doses. Resonance, Gerbner believes, has to do with relevant and appropriate ideas portrayed on the television. If people watch television and see something that connects to their reality, then it is likely that they will receive what Gerbner calls a double dose of the message and will eventually experience intensified cultivating effects. If heavy television viewing individuals live in a high crime neighborhood, then images of crime portrayed on the television will resonate with them. They can then identify with the situation and expect instances of crime more than would light viewers living in the same neighborhood. Similarly, if bullies see programs where harrying and bullying are rampant, they will feel a justification of their behavior. They will feel that since everybody does it, it's a good way of solving problems. As Gerbner concludes, the correlates of heavy viewing are most apparent among those for whom the topic holds considerable personal relevance. Cultivation theory is possibly one of the most interesting and pertinent theories in today's world. Television, in spite of the other mass communication mediums, is still the central and most pervasive mass medium. Hence, this theory is still applicable to understand the many maladies of society. Cultivation theory allows us to determine some of the consequences that long-term exposure television communication has on individuals. As theorist Dennis McQuail writes, the message of television is, in Gerbner's view, distinctive and deviant from reality on several key points. Yet, persistent exposure to it leads to its adoption as a consensual view of society. The main evidence for the cultivation theory comes from systematic content analysis of American television, carried out over several years and showing consistent distortions of reality in respect of family, work and roles, aging, death and dying, education, violence and crime. This content is said to provide lessons about what to expect from life, and it is not a very encouraging message, especially for the poor, women and racial minorities. For example, a highly prevalent problem in our society today is the misconstrued perception many women and adolescent girls have about their bodies. The media, by repeatedly portraying emaciated thin bodies as being desirable and beautiful, has created this fictional perception. The fact actually is quite different. When looking at them from a medical perspective, most of the women on television and in advertisements can be considered to be dangerously underweight. As Gerbner states, television is the most central and most pervasive mass medium in American culture, so there is no doubt that girls and women in our society are constantly bombarded by these images of inappropriate thinness through the television on a day-to-day basis. In fact, young women of around 15 years of age reported to watching around 20 to 25 hours or more of television, which is full of images of wave-thin bodies being seen as normal and desirable. This continuous flood of thinness being the ideal has led to a rise in body dissatisfaction and an increase in eating disorders among women. The figures that women are told to strive for are putting many of them in serious danger. Gerbner's cultivation theory was applied to this situation to check its fidelity. Hargreaves and Tigerman undertook a study in 2003 to apply the cultivation approach to the impact of images of undernourished women that appeared in television ads on girls. One of the theory's ideas that small, immediate effect of cultivation can eventually manifest into long-term effects that impact attitudes pertains to this study. The study was conducted to test how girls responded 2 years after being shown 20 commercials with thin females versus a group of girls who viewed 20 commercials without these images. It was found that the girls who had watched the commercials with the undernourished females would have immediate episodes of insecurity and distress about weight and later had greater body dissatisfaction than the girls who had not viewed those commercials. The researchers conclude that a feasible link between individual reactive episodes of dissatisfaction in response to specific media images and the development of body image is that enduring attitudes, beliefs and feelings about bodies and appearance accumulate over time through repeated exposure to ideals of attractiveness in the media. If women are continuously bombarded with images of thin females on the television, then they will, sooner or later, begin to believe that their bodies are inferior and hence they must make the effort in order to reach an unattainable beauty that the media incessantly projects. The concept of mainstreaming that Gerbner discusses can be easily linked to this issue regarding poor body image amongst fat women. According to the cultivation theory, heavy viewers of television will experience the effects of mainstreaming, where their attitudes and opinions are essentially created by information and portrayals they receive from the television. In the media, where women's beauty and body perfection are defined by emaciated figures, it is only natural that females who are heavy viewers of television begin to have their mindset fashioned by this ideal. It will not be very wrong to say that they begin to be affected by the reality constructed on the television more than the reality of the world around them. It has been proven time and again that heavy viewing young women glamorize weight loss and dieting due to what they see on the television. In fact, a study by Harrison and Hefner in 2006 found television viewing linked to subsequent increases in eating pathology. Another confirmatory example of this idea is a study that was conducted by researcher A.E. Becker in 2004, in which the impact of television being introduced to young women in a rural community in Fiji was investigated. The study again found that the young women's opinions about their bodies in terms of weight had been drastically influenced by the television, and they had urges to reshape their bodies in order to fit in with the ideals that were presented to them through the television. The researchers found that television appeared to redefine local aesthetic ideals for bodily appearance and presentation, especially among the heavy viewers. Resonance coming from the cultivation theory is the idea that if a person encounters something on the television that is already a part of her or his belief system, then that specific belief will be enhanced, and the individual will experience an even greater cultivating effect. Let us again look at the issues of women's perceptions about their bodies. Females have levels of acceptance regarding their bodies. If they have positive body image or they are satisfied with the way their body looks, then it is possible that they will not be affected by the media as greatly as women with negative body image would be. The study by Harrison and Hefner in 2006 found that women who reported higher levels of thin ideal internalization experienced more body anxiety following exposure to thin ideal media than women with lower levels of internalization. In other words, the women who already felt a need to be thin received a double dose of this belief when they saw it justified by the television's depictions of glorified, undernourished women. These messages resonate deeply within these women. The cultivation theory clearly translates into meaning when applicable to the case of female body image. Gerber's cultivation theory is thus useful when it comes to assessing the impact television has on our culture. It can be applied across age, race, profession, income, and many other seemingly unrelated factors to show that our shared beliefs stem from the television and create a mainstreaming effect. This theory can actually link up many of the perceptions our society has about the world, such as violence, racial stereotypes, and gender differences, among others, to the root cause of the images displayed by television. It is interesting to see how the attitudes, beliefs, and opinions that are prevalent in our society are perpetuated by the television. Although this theory provides us with a distinctive way of looking at television as a highly influential part of our culture, it leaves out some other aspects that also seem to have an impact on our attitudes and the belief systems that make up our society. To begin with, the cultivation theory ignores the influence exerted by other forms of media such as magazines, newspapers, commercials, music advertisements, and some such others. For example, if we look at the issue of women's obsession with thinness, it has been established that both the print and electronic media exposure are associated with an increased drive for thinness. We cannot blame the malady only on TV. Commercials, magazines, and printed advertisements are also heavily lined with figures that maintain the negative body image that many women have. Even though these contribute to women's views of their bodies may not be as profound as the contributions made by the television with regard to more serious issues like violence, gender bias, etc., they should not be completely disregarded. While these aspects of the media are most likely cultivating similar attitudes that are produced by the television, it is possible that they have some sort of other effect on women's perceptions of themselves. Thus, the attitudes that have been constructed for people by the media cannot be based solely on television. Another overlooked element that can lead to a creation of attitudes is the actual content of the programs that the viewer is watching. It is not enough to be a heavy viewer of television for mainstreaming to occur. A person who is a heavy viewer might be only watching the Discovery Channel, the History Channel, or some other channel with programming that does not fit in with mainstream society. These programs focus on issues that rarely deal with violence, gender roles, and other stereotypes. If an individual watched only these shows, then it is likely that his or her perceptions about the world would not be based in the reality constructed by the television, and these perceptions would not align with those of a highly mainstreamed individual. Females that view television shows that focus on real-world issues as opposed to the importance of maintaining that ideal emaciated body, or programs that include many thin women, will most likely feel less of a cultivating effect on their outlook about their own bodies. Evidence of this can be seen in a study by Tigeman and Pickering conducted in 1996, where they discovered that it is what the girls watched that mattered, and not just that they watched television. Also, certain other factors besides the media also play a role in the formation of people's belief systems. Gerbner's theory does not attend to how individuals without televisions or cable are able to construct their attitudes. Basic human interaction obviously leads to the construction of one's ideas and opinions, and television does not always play a role here. Even though it is likely that a person without access to a television might be interacting with another individual that has already been affected by the media, the aspect of real-world interactions cannot be left out of the creation of belief systems. In fact, talking of the body image issue, Harrison and Hefner state social factors like maternal and peer pressure to conform to an ideal standard predicted body dissatisfaction more strongly than did magazine exposure. Considering that the cultivation theory implies that television is the single most contributing factor to the creation of outlooks, which may not always be the case. On the other hand, the cultivation theory can also be used as a tool in creating mindsets that can have a positive impact. For example, even when looking at the case of poor body image for women in the context of the cultivation theory, something can be done to impede the dangerous effects that the television is having on women's self-confidence. Because television does play an important role in the cultivation of beliefs, the images that are portrayed on it can be controlled. Fewer images of emaciated bodies and less approval of them could have a large effect on females. By casting the average body in a more positive light, viewers may begin to perceive that different body types as also beautiful and desirable. Certain campaigns such as Dove are incorporating this idea into their advertisements. There are numerous communication theories, but Gerbner's cultivation theory is especially applicable to many situations. Whether it is stereotyping the role of women in society or attributing certain traits in a community, the cultivation theory finds resonance amongst most media researchers. So this is all for today. Hope all of you find the cultivation theory useful in recognizing the effects of large-scale television viewing. Bye for now.